A quick introduction of myself. I am the co-founder and CEO of Vidcode, and I have a background in writing computer science curriculum. That began 6 years ago, back in 2012, when I was a teaching assistant for the New York City Department of Education in their early software engineering pilot program. During that time, about a year or two later, I was able to sit in on the K-12 computer science pathway, the writing of it. And so in doing so, just kind of got affiliated with a lot of the standards out there. I will share a lot with you today, and I'm going to try to keep it under 20-25 minutes for my presentation, and then 5 minutes for questions. So, coding versus computer science is a topic that I like to bring up right away when we're talking about standards. Coding really means telling a computer what to do in a language it can understand. And then computer science is the study of computation, and coding is a part of computer science. And even as straightforward as this sentence can be, I really personally think about computer programming as all the text-based languages, as well as the visual block programming languages. And then I think about computer science as just the world around all of that: networks, data, hardware, both the ins and outs of the technology that surrounds, the GUI interfaces that we use on the World Wide Web. And so one thing I wanted to open up right away, just to place this particular webinar in the context of Wyoming here. So at Vidcode, we have, I'm going to demo for you guys and talk about standards in general. But I also wanted to share that we'll be sharing the standards line document that goes through each of the Wyoming standards, and we'll also talk about those as well. But before I do that, I kind of want to speak about the K-12 framework that was the underlying principles for each state to create their standards. And then we'll jump back into this document, go through some of these individual examples, starting with grades 3 through 5. I saw some elementary school members here on our webinar, so excited to talk about that. We'll also be going through middle school and high school as well. I know I saw more than a few high school participants as well. And then, can't go through everything in the stock, obviously, but we'll kind of just start to put the puzzle pieces together here, together. All right, so let me get back here. Oh, that worked. All right, so the K-12 CS framework, are the guiding principles that states have used to create their own state standards. And the core concepts around the K-12 CS framework include computing systems, networks and the internet, data and analysis, algorithms and programming, and impacts of computing. And so all of these core concepts are kind of meant to be built in, to both the elementary experience, the middle, and the high school. And so we'll keep seeing those themes throughout. Each of these categories get me really excited. Algorithms and programming, when we're talking about Python or JavaScript or any of the web programming languages, you're going to go deep into that category, as well as data analysis. A lot of modern data visualizations are really easy to, start even exploring something like data analysis at the elementary level, like draw a bar graph of, how much milk you drank this week or something like that. Can be an unplugged activity that immediately goes back on the screen. And we'll go through some examples like that. There's also a cultural side to the standards, and we see that across the states. And so I've listed some of those core practices here, which I know as, curriculum writers here on the Vidcode team, something that we try to bake into each step, each online tutorial, or at least have it covered in every 10 to 20 hours of our curriculum. And so inclusive culture, creating computational artifacts, Those things are really easy to bake in when we're talking about, you know, of the moment modern day issues that are affecting our students, you know, locally or regionally. Creating computational artifacts. On Vidcode, we see that as creating any web sketch, but it can, you know, what I just covered, it can be even a bar graph or a drawing of an understanding of the XY coordinate system that relates to a computational practice like that. Collaboration is huge, testing and refining, recognizing problems in a program, talking about programming. I know in Vidcode, the way we bring that in is a discussion before the tutorials get started, as well as a coding journal at the end. Can be two kind of lo-fi analog ways to get that communication about computing in, which for me, when I learned programming later, well, in grad school, that was so important to me to be able to talk to, you know, people in the room and my friends about it. And it's so rare because we're all kind of learning to code together. So I know in our curriculum, again, discussion and journals can be great for that. And then abstraction is a core practice that we're going to see across a lot of these standards today. Well, not across, but it's a core concept that needs to be established for a student to really understand computer science. All right. And so I also wanted to take a moment to think about computational thinking, kind of another really big phrase that comes up when we're talking about computer science standards. And so I think it's a good moment to break it down. So computational thinking covers 5 areas. Decomposition, which is breaking down a big problem into little problems. So many great ways to do that. Generalization, comparing one problem to another problem. Abstraction, deciding which details don't matter. Pattern recognition, deciding what to repeat in a puzzle or a coding program or anything, could be a recipe, right? And algorithm design, solving all of the problems of one type with a single recipe. And so again, just reading through this list, there's a lot of both on and off the computer activities in a really broad way that can be applied to this, which is great. Now the CSTA standards, I'm not going to cover as much on this webinar because I know we're focused on Wyoming, but I did want to just kind of quickly show you guys this will be in the deck. And I know that many states have CSTA chapters and all that good stuff. You know, one thing that I would just like to say about the CSTA standards, Vidcode is aligned. And if you guys have any CSTA chapters in Wyoming, we have a bunch of materials and free PD workshops and stuff that we can share with whatever trainers or teachers lead that type of opportunity. And so just to kind of higher level go over how the CSTA frames a lot of this stuff, computing systems. And so they look at it from an elementary school level all the way to a high school level, starting with like basic troubleshooting that could be in, you know, a visual block programming language, like Scratch for elementary 3 through 5, and then understanding how computer systems are built and function on a hardware level. That's really, and we see that a lot at Vidcode, that by the time students are in high school, those are the concepts that we want to make sure they hit. I'm going to skip through these examples because we're going to use more Wyoming examples today. But in the slide deck that I'm sharing with you guys, we've pulled a bunch of different examples for each of these CSTA categories. Now, algorithms and programming, I am going to pause here for a second because this really has inspired, I think, a lot of similar with the K-12 framework, but the CSTA algorithms and programming standards are just really great for the 6th through 12th age group here in terms of how to really master that skill of writing your own function, writing your own you know, algorithm in a text-based programming environment. And so, you know, in that light, with Vidcode, and we have a tutorial that's free online called Code the News. That's a really good example of the algorithms and programming standards from both the CSTA and a high school Wyoming perspective. And so I'm gonna have the links here, plenty of links to get you guys into these tutorials. but I want to make sure that everyone walks away today with some tutorials that they can test out and see how the standards are aligning, see how they're being applied. And in the case of Vidcode, all of our lesson plans have the CSTA standards built in. And then, like I said, for the Wyoming state standards, we can send you guys that PDF alignment doc as well. So just a little preview of what that's gonna look like here. All right, let's see. Okay, not doing too bad. So impacts of computing, I'm gonna breeze through this. APCSP is another big standards, computer science standards that everyone's, it's not really a standard, but a framework that many people use at the high school level. And like I said, I know we have a couple high school participants. So in my standards presentation here, I've just broken down again some of the categories that the AP Computer Science Principles Framework, how they organize some of these concepts. And again, you're gonna see just a lot of rinse and repeat, you know, and again, it just, same concepts, right, from elementary, middle, and high school, but they're getting much more in depth at the high school level. And so I know personally with the AP Computer Science Principles, you know, mastering some of those data networks concepts, mastering abstraction, and working on some real world problems like that is important at that level. All right, so that was my overview of the kind of general standards and frameworks that have inspired state level frameworks. And now I'm going to jump into the Wyoming Standards alignment document. But before I do that, I would love to just quickly do a demo of the Vidcode tutorial that I showed you guys, also because this is a Vidcode standards alignment doc. And I want to make sure you guys are understanding kind of how we put it together. So let me open up. Let's stop my share. Just give me 1 minute to get organized. Thanks for your patience. Let's see here. Pressure's on. All right. And in the meantime, I would love to, as I'm kind of getting reorganized here, just pause for any questions. And it might not even be a question. It might be like, hey, this is something that I was coming into the webinar, wanted to know, you haven't covered it. I'll either quickly, you know, splice it into this webinar, or my favorite thing to do is just follow up to those questions via email. So please don't hold back. No question is off, even if you don't know quite what you're asking. So I welcome any on all questions. All right. Now I'm going to share that screen. Okay, so I've got a couple things open here. All right, so here I am on the Vidcode platform. So kind of jumping back into that Wyoming standards doc that we've created for you guys. Let's just, you know, with kind of what we went over, start to look at how Wyoming has broken down these standards in grades 3 through 5. So, you know, first off, we see abstraction and global impact. And I mentioned it earlier in the presentation, but that's a really, you know, great standard. And it wants students to independently describe how internal and external parts of computing devices function to form a system. We also, you know, and that's a big concept. So in that case, we're looking at devices inside and outside of the computer. Now, also in grades 3 through 5, we're looking at, you know, a lot of global impact questions, as well as cybersecurity and intro to programming. And so with all that in mind, I'm going to move into the Vidcode interface and show you guys how those ideas start to take form in a coding project. So here I am at vidcode.com, and I'm actually going to sign out because everyone on the webinar today can go ahead and create a free account, and we have plenty of free forever material that you can implement today. So sign up as an educator or guardian, because that means that you're going to get all the cheat sheets and lesson plans that you're going to want to start running some of these project modules. I'm going to sign up with my email. All right. So once I've logged into the interface on Vidcode, created my account, I'm going to have 2 calls to action here: start coding, as well as add students. Start coding is going to bring me to the project-based tutorials that I'm referencing on this webinar for your students to complete. And add students is going to take me to the educator dashboard, where I can add rosters of students, see progress, and access lesson plans. So let's start with start coding. So we have 2 sections here, and starter projects is going to be where you find that code the nose, excuse me, code the news, code the nose would be cool though, code the news tutorial that I referenced as a really good, crash course introductions to algorithms and programming for your students. And grade level wise, I would recommend this just for reading level grades 4, 5, and up. Now I'm going to go to Intro to JavaScript. This is also available to you guys. This is over 10 open-ended online projects that are going to cover a lot of the standards in the document that I'm sharing with you today. And so let's just go ahead and jump in the first one. Now let's go back to the upper elementary standards here. And again, so we're looking at networks, the internet, impacts on computing, abstraction, programming, and algorithms. That's a lot of stuff, but it's also something that, again, is kind of, I feel like, rinsed and repeated in a lot of the core concepts that you have to learn to start text-based programming anyway. So let's walk through that. Let's think about algorithms. Let's think about global impact and computing systems. So here on Vidcode, the first thing that your students are going to do is either select or upload a video file. So not to get too much into minutia, but this in itself could be a computing systems example, because students are learning how a video gets loaded on a web page. And we have a lot of this in our lesson plans in general in terms of the outside conversation about what's going on inside the computer. But in here, there are file systems that allow this source file to be pulled up on the computer. Now, there's only so much you can learn in one intro tutorial, but I'm kind of gonna tack on some of the concepts here just to illustrate the idea. And, moving through this particular tutorial, and again, 4th grade and up is great for this. Students will start with a drag and drop environment. Now they just dragged and dropped a line of code. In this case, they're learning about sequencing. They're learning what is this line of code? Is it a web programming language? Is it powerful? What does it do? They learn that it's a function. What is a function? And so all of this is in the algorithms and programming, just like full stop, 100% covering those concepts. And now as we continue to move through, again, just this kind of first open-ended project, I'm going to continue following the instructions as a student that Vidcode has given me. And I'm going to start to adjust different values and make this particular project mine. Like, maybe that doesn't work. Erase it. And then, let's say I'm actually in a classroom environment here, and I really want to get that global impacts on computing, or maybe the cultural, collaborative side of it. And so, the next thing I'm going to ask my students, and I'm totally improvising this for the Wyoming Standards right now. But again, with the Vidcode curriculum, how we think of that, there's a lot of different ways, even on the fly, especially when you have multimedia access like this right away, or even just writing a word, thinking about you know, how are you impacted today by, you know, some part of a computing system? And let's say here, since we're looking at video files being loaded on the web, it could be how many videos do you watch per day on the web? And maybe, you know, I'm gonna sit there and think about it as a kid, and I'm gonna say I watch 3 videos a day online. All right, and so this, again, is kind of an improvised example, but what I'm trying to show here is a conversation happening as the student's coding. It's integrating outside concepts into the coding sketch in a couple different ways, both through conversation, but also through uploading different media files, as well as following the curriculum that Vidcode's given, and breaking out some of the questions about, you know, what's on the computer and what's off the computer. Now, this is one online tutorial. In the case of Vidcode, we provide a lot of unplugged activities and teacher scaffolding so that you don't, you know, have to kind of make it up on the fly like I just did. So let me just quickly show you where that is. We're going to go to Add Students. And this is where you can have as many students as you want, hundreds of students, you know, at your school for free, to start tracking and seeing how this is working for them. And I'm gonna go to the lesson plans here, create a filter. And so here, like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we've got the CSTA standards baked in, but we also have the suggested agenda and different topics to discuss with your students. And this is another place where the standards are brought in. It's not just in, you know, the online tutorial itself, but it's also baked into some of the discussion questions, as well as that reflection, that coding journal that I mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar, which I'm a big fan of. And for Vidcode, we provide the opportunity to reflect for all 200 plus online tutorials. We have 200 plus lesson plans just like this with multiple questions. So you as a teacher or administrator or school who's really inspired to reach every grade level with standards aligned CS curriculum. Again, it's going to be really easy to pair that if you have kind of the online experience that's covering a lot of it, and then the lesson plan that's covering a grab bag of solutions that cover absolutely all the standards. And that's how we approach it at Vidcode. And so again, I kind of took an elementary school slant today, so I'm not gonna have time to go through a middle school example and a high school example, but I kind of wanted to start with elementary because it's actually one that demands a little bit more creativity and out of the box thinking sometimes. So that was fun to go through with you guys. All right, so we are, like I said, there's a ton more to talk about here. I'm gonna send you guys this document, and then I would love and welcome questions back like, this doesn't make sense, or how does this connect with this? Or just specific questions about a grade level that you want to impact, or questions that you have about the Vidcode product or really any coding curriculum out there. We know a lot of them, so we'd be happy to address those questions. Let me just switch quickly back. Just going to do my thank you slides. So just want to make sure you guys have a couple links, and I will send you these links via email as well as on the webinar. But this is the link that I used to set up that free account today. Highly encourage you to sign up today. We have a little chat box that you can always ask for support from our team. I also would love if you email me directly. For me, that's a big win. After a webinar, if someone reaches out directly to me with a question, so would really welcome that. My email is ally@vidcode.com. And with that, I haven't gotten a heads up that we have any immediate questions, but I'm going to pause. I'm just going to say thank you. And then I'll let Teresa let me know if we have any questions from the chat box. Thank you, everyone, again.